No, we're not ready, Kurt.
I already went live.
Are we live, Kurt?
Yes, we are.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. Didn't realize we were live. So here we go. Once again, hello. Welcome to another edition of Socialist Action Webcast. My name is Elizabeth Bice, and I'm the Federal Treasurer of Socialist Action, a member of the NDP Socialist Caucus Steering Committee. We acknowledge that this event is taking place on Indigenous lands across Turtle Island, known as North America. That includes the unceded territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Wendat, and Haudenosaunee people in a place called Toronto. We join in the fight for justice, recognizing that there can be no real reconciliation without restitution. That entails seizing the assets of the big resource corporations and returning them to the commons. Tonight's topic is Turmoil in the Green Party of Canada, featuring Dimitri Lascaris, former Socialist Action candidate for Green Party leader, and discussant Barry Weisleder, Federal Secretary of Socialist Action. Dimitri will speak for about 25 minutes or so, followed by Barry for up to 15. After that, we will take questions written into the chat column from our online audience, so keep your questions coming. So let's begin. I am pleased to welcome Dimitri Lascaris. After graduating from the University of Toronto Faculty of Law in 1991, Dimitri began his legal career at the Wall Street law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell. In 2004, he joined one of Canada's leading action law firms, Susskind LLP. In 2012, Dimitri was named by Canadian Lawyers magazine as one of the 25 most influential lawyers in Canada. In July 2016, Dimitri decided to devote himself to journalism, activism, and pro bono legal work. He has been a correspondent of the Real News Network and is currently a member of its board of directors. In the 2015 federal election, Dimitri ran for the Green Party in London West. Subsequently, he served as justice critic in the shadow cabinet of the Green Party. In 2020, Dimitri ran for leader of the Green Party of Canada, finishing second of 8 candidates with 45.5% of the votes. He speaks to us tonight from Montreal. Welcome, Dimitri.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Pleasure to be with my comments from Socialist Action again. I'm coming to you this evening from the unceded territory of the Ganingahaga people in what we now call Old Montreal, and they are the true custodians of this land on which I'm privileged to live and work today. So I'll just jump right into the current situation within the Green Party, and it is without question an unprecedented crisis in the 30 to 40 year history of this party. It has laid bare some extremely important ideological differences within the membership. And I think, like, one of the many lessons that I have drawn from what is now happening, it's a painful lesson, but an important one nonetheless, is that we have a tendency to talk about political parties as though they're monolithic. And I've seen that, online as this tragic and terrible situation within the Green Party has unfolded over the last couple of months. People saying this demonstrates conclusively that the Green Party is a right-wing party. The Green Party is a pro-Israel party. In fact, I don't know how one could come to that conclusion from watching what has been unfolding. It is clear that, in fact, there's very considerable disagreement amongst members of this party about some very fundamental issues, not just the issue of Israel and Palestine, but the issue of what it means to be a leader, what it means to have a party that's member-driven, what it means to value participatory democracy and social justice. And so the first thing I will say before I launch into a description of what is going on and how we got here is that we should resist the temptation, and I think this is really an important lesson from what's happening, to regard any political party, including the Green Party, as monolithic. I would never take the position that the leadership of the NDP reflects the base. I think and have believed strongly for many years that the base of the NDP on the whole is well to the left of the leadership, and that has been the case for some time. But there are institutional mechanisms in place and media institutions in place that do everything possible to ensure that the people who ultimately emerge as the leaders of political parties govern to the right of the membership. And we're seeing that, I think, unfold in very painful ways within our party right now. So how did we get here? And this is, of course, just my view. Other people within our party may have a different perspective on how we got here, but it's one that I've thought about a great deal, and I believe can be supported with the evidence. Last year we had a leadership contest. As was indicated, I ran. I came a close second. I campaigned on an explicitly eco-socialist platform. We promoted policies during the campaign that I don't think anybody who has run for the leadership of a party that has representation in Parliament has advocated for in recent memory. So, for example, we advocated for a hard limit on the accumulation of wealth. We advocated for the withdrawal of Canada from NATO. We advocated for a maximum spread between worker compensation and executive compensation. We advocated for an Indigenous veto right over extractive activities on Indigenous lands, and on and on and on. And it was a very bold platform, and I think many people at the outset believed that, especially because of some perceptions, misperceptions on the left about the Green Party, that this type of a platform had no hope of winning, of prevailing in a leadership contest. And we came remarkably close, despite fearsome opposition from the right and from the establishment media. And the candidate who emerged as the winner was Annamie Paul. And Annamie, I think, during the course of the leadership contest, did a very skillful job of avoiding substantive debate on questions that went beyond the scope of the platform of the Green Party. And so Annamie's position when asked about matters of policy was simply to repeat existing Green Party policy, or to state baldly without elaboration that she supported the policy on that particular issue. And the emphasis of Annamie's campaign, in this regard, her campaign and her victory were historic. She was and is the first Black Jewish woman to win the leadership of a political party in this country, especially one having representation in Parliament. And that was an important development in Canadian politics. But it, I think, obscured some very important policy differences between Annamie and other candidates, primarily myself, an eco-socialist candidate, that are now being laid bare. And so what in particular am I talking about? Well, what happened was that, and I'm talking specifically, this is not the only problem we're dealing with in our party, but this is the issue which led ultimately to the calls for Annamie's removal and the no confidence vote that's scheduled to take place on July 20th. In May, as Israel was escalating its relentless attacks on the Palestinian people, starting with violence at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam, during the month of Ramadan, then with planned evictions, ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from their homes in East Jerusalem, and then finally with another brutal assault on Gaza, which resulted in the deaths, the murder really, of dozens of Palestinian children. There was an uproar in Canada. In fact, what I saw as somebody who's very active in the Palestinian solidarity movement was an unprecedented level of denunciation within mainstream discourse of what Israel was doing. It was very much a watershed moment for the Palestinian solidarity movement, not just in this country, but internationally, in the month of May. So, for example, we were seeing in mainstream media people openly acknowledging that Israel was an apartheid state, which it is. And so in that context, Jagmeet Singh, to his credit, following the adoption of a policy at the most recent NDP convention calling for an arms embargo on Israel, openly called for an arms embargo in Parliament, no less. We in our party were the first party with representation in Parliament to adopt a policy calling for sanctions on Israel, including an arms embargo. And we did that 5 years ago, before Annamie Paul was even a member of our party. And yet our leader would not advocate during this critical time of unprecedented, denunciation of Israel's human rights abuses for any form of sanction on Israel. And ultimately, as the calls were growing ever louder for Annamie to take a position that was consistent with our member-approved policy, adopted with over 90% support in 2016, Annamie and the party put out a statement. And the statement did not in any way, shape, or form recognize that the Palestinian people were the oppressed, and that the state of Israel was the oppressor. It made no mention of sanctions and simply repeated what I recall as a superficial and unhelpful call for dialogue. The Palestinian people have been all too willing to talk about the creation of a truly sovereign state. The problem is that Israel, which has all of the economic, military, and political power, has absolutely no interest in allowing the Palestinians to have a state. And therefore, a return to dialogue is meaningless if it isn't backed up with some form of sanction that levels the negotiating field between the Palestinians and the Israelis, a negotiating field which is incredibly imbalanced and has been for decades. Sanctions are the key to justice, a just and lasting peace in Israel and Palestine, and that's something our party recognized, but our leader did not do that. So this precipitated a reaction from our MPs, and each one of them reacted in their own way. So Elizabeth May, this hasn't been talked about much, but she retweeted, for example, a tweet by Naomi Klein accusing Israel of committing war crimes. And this was language which was entirely missing from our party statement. Paul Manley retweeted a tweet, or in a tweet, drew attention to the recent report of Human Rights Watch, a historic report accusing Israel of committing the crime of apartheid. And the most vigorous, shall I say, departure from the party line came from Jenica Atwin, our youngest MP and the only person that the Green Party of Canada has ever succeeded in getting elected outside of British Columbia. And she stated explicitly that the statement that had been put out the party was totally unacceptable, that she stood with the Palestinian people, and she called for an end to Israeli apartheid. Within days of this happening, Noah Zatzman, who had been appointed last year as the senior advisor to leader Annamie Paul after she won in the leadership contest, and who was frequently described in the mainstream media since that time as her spokesperson, posted on his Facebook page a condemnation of Jagmeet Singh, me, and unspecified MPs from the Green Party, accusing them of appalling anti-Semitism, and remarkably, astonishingly, vowing to work for the defeat of those MPs and to replace them with Zionists. This Facebook post was put on his Facebook page, presumably by him. He hasn't denied that he posted it. On May 14th, he pinned it to the top of his page and made it public, and it sat there for days. Obviously, he wanted to draw as much attention to it as possible. And eventually, it began to circulate on social media and ultimately came to the attention of the mainstream media. And on May 29th, the CBC did a lengthy article in which it brought to the public's attention for the first time in the mainstream discourse that Annamie Paul's senior advisor was accusing unnamed Green MPs of anti-Semitism and vowing to work for their defeat. Upon the publication of this article on May 29th, rather than show the slightest bit of regret for what he had done, Noah Zatzman doubled down and went to various media organizations, including La Presse, Canadian Press, and iPolitics, and actually identified the MPs whom he was accusing of anti-Semitism as being Paul Manley and Jenica Atwin, particularly Jenica Atwin. And he repeated the smear several times to the national media in late May and early June. And throughout this entire time, to the astonishment of the party's members, Annamie Paul did not say anything to rein him in. At least she didn't say anything publicly. There was nothing done publicly to rein him in. He was not terminated. He was not chastised. And most importantly, said nothing to defend the reputations of our MPs whose names were being dragged through the mud by a person who can only be described as a fanatical Zionist. And so what happened? Ultimately, Jenica Atwin, who was the primary target of Noah Zatzman's ire, decided she had had enough. It later emerged, by the way, that she was making repeated efforts to try to put an end to these smears by reaching out to the leader, that her outreach was being rebuffed or ignored. And it was only after Jenica Atwin crossed the aisle to the Liberals, I think that was on June 10th that was announced, that Annamie Paul finally, under pressure from media organizations who were asking her to express a view about the allegation, she finally acknowledged that in fact Jenica and Paul are not anti-Semites. And what this means, of course, is that she knew all along throughout this period of almost 4 weeks that the accusation being leveled against our MPs was false, that he was smearing them falsely of anti-Semitism, and yet said nothing throughout this period publicly to defend them. At that point, there was an upsurge of indignation amongst the party's members and calls for Annemie's resignation or her removal from office. Now, prior to that time, it is true, prior to the Noah Zatzman's attack on Annemie Paul, there were a series of reports in the Toronto Star which relied upon statements or leaks from anonymous sources who were close to Annemie Paul, alleging that Annemie Paul was being obstructed in the pursuit of her agenda for reasons related to racism. The allegation was not explicit, but the article insinuated, the first article in the Toronto Star, quoting somebody close to Annemie Paul by the name of Sean Yeo and other unnamed persons. And so that, and that's something that we as a party need to address, and we need to work through very carefully, with sensitivity, with respect, with a recognition that our party does have a problem with diversity. It certainly does, and we need to address that. Those are issues that need to be handled very carefully and respectfully for the betterment of our party. But it was not that series of articles which precipitated calls for Annemie Paul's resignation or removal. It was the attack on, as I said, Paul Manley and Jenica Atwin, and the vow to remove them from office, coupled with the leader's failure for whatever reason to say anything publicly in their defense prior to Jenica Atwin's departure. And so where we are now is we have a no confidence vote pending before our federal council. It's to take place on July 20th. Under our Constitution, the federal council must vote in order for this matter to be referred to the members. 75% of the federal councillors must vote no confidence. Even if a majority vote no confidence, but less than 75%, the matter will not be referred to the members. If the 75% threshold is reached, then the members at a general meeting, which has been scheduled for the weekend of August 20th, will then vote on the issue of confidence in the leader. And if they vote no confidence, then that will trigger the replacement of the leader with an interim leader in all probability, followed by who will carry us through the election, which we all are anticipating will happen within the next several months. And then that would be followed by a leadership contest, probably to take place or to begin in the first quarter or the first 6 months of 2022. Now, importantly, when the federal council met to initiate this confidence review a couple of weeks ago, it actually gave Annemie Paul a way to avoid the vote on July 20th. And what it said was a majority of the councillors voted in support of a motion which said that if Ms. Paul repudiates Noah Zatzman, issues a joint statement with Paul Manley, expressing complete support for him and expressing support for our caucus, that the leadership, the confidence vote would not take place on July 20th. All indications are that Ms. Paul has no interest in complying with that demand. She has in fact complained, I'm paraphrasing, these are not her exact words, that effectively the federal council is seeking to impose constraints on her freedom of speech. So whatever her reasoning may be, there's no indication at this point in time that Ms. Paul is going to adopt, respect the wishes of federal council or majority of the councillors, and we're going to end up having a confidence vote on July 20th. A couple of other things I want to say, in the time allotted to me to speak. It will not have escaped the notice of people on the left that Jenica Atwin made a rather strange decision when she decided to leave the Green Party of Canada, and she went to the Liberal Party. And those of us who know the Liberal Party's position on Israel and Palestine expected that this was going to result inevitably in Jenica's retraction of her condemnation of Israeli apartheid. And sure enough, from the moment she crossed the aisle, the pressure was intense. It came from, pro-Israel lobby organizations. It came from liberal MPs who are known to be very supportive of Israel. And sure enough, within a matter of days, Jenica expressed regret for having offended the Jewish community. She wasn't particularly detailed in what she said that was offensive, but she then deleted the post from her Twitter account in which she accused Israel of apartheid. So I'm not going to defend Jenica's decision at all. I think she made a terribly wrong decision. I understand why she did not feel comfortable any longer in the Green Party caucus. My understanding is that the NDP has a policy of not accepting people who cross the aisle. A policy, by the way, that I think it should revisit, especially in light of what happened here. And also, Jenica said that the NDP had not reached out to her, but that the Liberals had reached out to her. She also, I think, was probably mindful of the fact that in her riding, historically, the NDP have not come close to winning, certainly not in the recent past, and that if she wanted to leave the Green Party but have a serious shot at retaining her seat, she was either going to have to go with the Conservatives or the Liberals, and my guess is she decided to take the lesser of those two evils. But at the end of the day, if I were in her position and I felt it was imperative for me to leave the party because I could no longer stomach the attacks coming from the leader's office, I would have run as an independent. I certainly wouldn't have gone to the Liberals under any circumstances, and I don't support that decision at all. Nonetheless, as mistaken as that decision may have been, it doesn't undermine the legitimacy of Jenica's complaint about the way she was treated. She could be wrong about going to the Liberals and simultaneously be right that she was being treated very, very unfairly by the leader's office, and particularly Noah Zatzman. At least she can say, that as a member of the Liberal caucus, she is not publicly being accused of anti-Semitism by the leader's office. At least I've certainly seen no such allegation against her. So I'm just, I'm trying simply to explain what was probably going through her mind, while at the same time recognizing that she made a terribly wrong decision to go to the Liberal Party. And the other thing I want to say, I touched upon it already, in our party, I indicated we do have a problem with diversity. And from the beginning of the leadership contest, I referred many times to a poll that was done, a survey that was done by the National Observer during the 2019 election, which found that we had a lower proportion of candidates from racialized communities than even the People's Party of Canada. That is an astonishing fact, one that should deeply trouble every single Green. I talked about it repeatedly during the leadership contest. And frankly, I didn't need that survey, for me to know that we needed to do a lot better on diversity, because you could just see, the composition of our candidate pool. You're in the Green Party long enough, you see on federal council in the shadow cabinet, you could see that racialized communities were underrepresented. And so this was something that we have to deal with. And so I completely accept that this is a problem that our party must resolve at the earliest opportunity in a way that's sensitive and respectful. But I think it's important at the same time that we recognize that there are legitimate reasons why people are unhappy with the leadership of Ms. Paul. And what we're struggling with as a party is to, it's a very, very difficult struggle, is to distinguish between legitimate criticism of a leader who comes from a racialized community, while at the same time understanding that there are real problems with diversity within our party. And working that out is very difficult, and it's having a terribly painful impact on our party. And, frankly, I don't know how this is all going to end up. So that's my presentation to you about how we got here, what's going on. I welcome your questions and look forward to hearing the thoughts of Brother Barry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. Our next speaker, indeed, is Barry Weisleder. He is a writer, editor, union organizer, and a political producer of this webcast series. Barry is co-chair of the NDP Socialist Caucus, a steering committee member of the Workers' Action Movement, and federal secretary of Socialist Action. He's coming from Toronto, and welcome, Barry.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. This is an important discussion on the state of the left in Canada and on the movement for eco-socialism. It's not just about the personalities that are clashing inside one of the parties of the body politic. And it has implications for the very future of humanity and nature. First of all, I want to congratulate Dimitri Lascaris. He waged an amazing campaign that rallied thousands of people to eco-socialist ideas. That is a testament to Dimitri's consummate skills as a superb organizer and an articulate proponent of radical socioeconomic change. In the end, the Green Party selected the most conservative pro-capitalist candidate who ran to be its leader. In fact, most of the candidates for the leadership were pro-capitalist. In interviews with the mass media, Annamie Paul emphasized her identity instead of highlighting her policy ideas. Like her predecessor and prominent backer, Elizabeth May, Paul's ideas conform to the tired old Green Party outlook on private ownership of the economy, not to mention its general support for Ottawa's pro-imperialist foreign policy. Annamie Paul, a liberal-minded civil liberties lawyer, won with 12,090 votes against Dimitri's 10,081 votes after 8 rounds of ballot counting. The result highlighted not only the sharp divide in the Green Party between right and left, and I agree it's complex. You could say it's a minefield. But this divide also reflects the current mass radicalization, especially of young workers, stemming from the combined economic, health, and environmental crises of late capitalism. Annamie Paul failed to acknowledge, much less to congratulate Dimitri for his powerful campaign. Moreover, at one stage in the leadership race, Paul stated that Dimitri should not be allowed to remain in the contest. She denounced his position on Palestine as redolent of anti-Semitism, a trope of the Zionist apartheid camp in world politics. She is opposed to Dimitri being allowed to run for leader in the future. Socialist Action believes that pro-capitalist policies are a toxic dead end. The election of Paul reaffirmed the pro-capitalist character of the Green Party of Canada. It will never be socialist, ecologist, working class party. It has no links to the labor movement, and thus it has no roots in working class socialism. The working class, in order to rescue humanity and the environment from imminent global capitalist catastrophe, requires a revolutionary socialist party. It needs a revolutionary working class party to help to organize and to lead the fundamental change that is so urgently necessary. This brings me to the second discussion point. What is to be done now? I respectfully submit that it would be a mistake for socialists to squander precious time and energy by staying in the Green Party, by serving as a loyal opposition to Annamie Paul and the embattled establishment within it. I mean, that establishment will continue even in the absence of Annamie Paul. Many of the socialists who joined to vote for Dimitri have since voted with their feet. They quit the bourgeois electoralist Green Party. So now is the time for eco-socialists to join in the construction of a genuinely revolutionary socialist party. But how? That isn't going to materialize by itself. A transitional step in that direction would be to appeal to the most progressive sections of the labor movement and the radical socialist public to launch a revolutionary eco-socialist movement. Dimitri is nursing a project called Green Left Canada. He didn't mention it, but I hope he will tell us some more details about what he has in mind, especially concerning its precise political program and timelines. You know, the key components for any transformative movement are program and strategy. To offer a meaningful alternative to the toxic status quo, the effort cannot be limited to reforms. Yes, we fight for reforms, but we can't be limited to the fight for reforms. It cannot stop short of the nationalization of big oil and gas and the giant banks under workers and indigenous control. Fear of violating existing trade agreements should not deter. Existing capitalist trade deals must be torn to shreds to establish a democratically planned economy. This is a precondition to making a rapid break with the fossil fuel capitalist economy at a time when the planet is on fire. It is a prerequisite to the survival of humanity in harmony with nature. Here comes the third point. The Green Party is now in a terminal crisis. It was in decline beforehand, doomed to remain a fringe capitalist party in Canada. Despite major media hype for Annamie Paul when she ran as the party's new federal leader, the Green Party failed to break through in Toronto Centre by-election in October 2020. Paul got 32.7% of the votes, largely at the expense of the NDP. But the Green Party candidate in York Centre was trounced, receiving only 2.6%, down from 3.6% in the 2019 general election. The Green candidate actually finished in fifth spot behind the racist, ultra-nationalist, ultra-conservative People's Party leader Maxime Bernier, who ran there. In Saskatchewan, the Greens were swamped in the October 2020 provincial election, winning the support of just 2.3% of the voters. So bad was the result that the newly formed Buffalo Party received more votes than the Greens, despite running less than one-third the number of candidates. In British Columbia, the Greens were huge losers in the 2020 provincial election, winning just 2 of 87 ridings and seeing their share of the popular vote fall to 15%, down from 16.8% in the 2017 election. Since the election of the conservative, pro-NATO, anti-choice, pro-Zionist Annamie Paul as leader, there is no evident electoral uptick for the party. Moreover, new rules governing debate on resolutions inside the Green Party virtually preclude a repeat of the pro-Palestinian, pro-BDS policy upset that occurred at its convention in 2016. That won't happen again. Across most of Canada, the party remains a non-factor. It holds no provincial seats in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland and Labrador. It has only 1 seat in the Ontario legislature, where the party drew a smaller share of popular support in the 2018 Ontario election than it did in 2014. It holds just 3 seats in the New Brunswick legislature. While the Greens are the official opposition party in Prince Edward Island, the province is so small that the mayor of the city of Oshawa, just east of Toronto, governs over more people, 170,000, than does the premier of PEI, 160,000. Federally, the Greens won 3 seats in last year's general election, which was its most ever. But the party's overall support is lower now than it was more than a decade ago. In the 2008 election, the party got 6.6% of the popular vote. In 2019, it received 6.5%. Not much upward momentum is evident there. And the party's sole MP east of British Columbia, who was 1/3 of its parliamentary caucus, just quit to join the Liberal Party, which, she has her reasons, but does not show a great amount of political depth. So despite being a formal political party for nearly a quarter of a century, the Greens remain a fringe party in most parts of Canada. Which raises the question, why continue? Some of their policies appear to be similar to those of the New Democratic Party, and therein lies the answer. The NDP is the only mass labor-based party in North America. It was formed by a formal merger of the Canadian Labour Congress and the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation in 1961. Some capitalists support the Greens, hoping to use it to split away some of the NDP vote, or even to force a merger between the working class NDP and the bourgeois Green Party. Such a move would weaken independent Labour political action even more than the pro-capitalist NDP leaders undermine Labour. The way to strengthen Labour's political might is to fight for socialist policies in the unions and in the electoral arm of the unions, the NDP. It's just plain wrong to see the Green Party as a vehicle for the left, much less for eco-socialism. Conservatives would love to see the Greens hang around, creating 3-way splits on the left that have paved the way to victory for Tories. And the Liberals seem not to be very worried about it, but don't expect the Greens to change. Despite her by-election defeat, Annamie Paul boasted that the Greens will be in a, quote, very competitive option, quote, in the next election. The NDP, on the other hand, can put an end to this political irritant simply by turning left, by advancing a workers' agenda. My third discussion point is about life inside the Green Party. We heard a lot about that now from Dimitri, and he has my sympathies. I referred earlier to the changed rules governing internal policy debate. severely limiting the scope and substance of what can be discussed at Green Party conventions. In addition, any prominent Green Party member who advocates a tactical vote for NDP, independent, or Liberal candidates, eco-socialist or otherwise, in order to defeat Aaron O'Toole's Tories, is likely to be disqualified as a candidate or expelled from the party. Remember, Miriam Haddad was briefly removed from the GPC leadership race simply because she criticized the Green Party of British Columbia. Meanwhile, on the eve of a federal election, the party announced that it is cutting half of its staff, some 15 individuals. It is revoking funds designated for the leader's campaign in Toronto Centre. Even the leader's membership status is now in question. The Green Party will convene a special federal council meeting on July 20th to decide whether to conduct a vote of confidence in the leader. Why? Because Annamie Paul failed to openly condemn the actions of her former advisor, Noah Zatzman. As Dimitri explained, Zatzman accused unnamed Green MPs and other politicians of stoking anti-Semitism and discrimination. He pledged to work to defeat them. His comments came after Fredericton MP Jenica Atwin publicly criticized Paul's stance on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in which Atwin stated, and I quote, "I stand with Palestine and condemn the unthinkable airstrikes in Gaza. End apartheid." Close quote. Well, she's right, or was right. Zatzman condemned Atkin's statement, calling it, quote, "further evidence of an organization whose leadership fosters a culture of systemic anti-Semitism and discrimination." Quote. Annamie Paul, he wrote, was elected by a majority of party members to change this, and I have faith that she will. Close quote. Liana Kuzmano, Green Party president, reported that Paul's tenure as leader has led to canceled party memberships and dwindling donations. For a non-confidence vote to occur, at least 75% of the federal councillors must call for it. So, if so, a final vote to determine Paul's fate would happen at a general membership meeting on August 21st. Does Paul appear willing to compromise? Not one bit. She just appointed Richard Zurowski to her shadow cabinet. Her new party critic for Green Recovery publicly denounced, quote, BDS terrorists, quote, and strongly implied Green MP Paul Manley and former Green MP Jenica Atwin are anti-Semitic. On Facebook, Zurowski wrote, quote, "She, Paul, makes the hard choices, and that is why I support her. She is pushing hard against the anti-Semitic factions, like the BDS terrorist group within the GPC that is using the Middle East as a wedge to isolate and spread misinformation, hijacking the GPC mandate. It is sad to see their agendas being promoted by Manley and Atwin." Close quote. That's pretty toxic stuff coming from a top advisor to the leader of any party. Eve Engler reminds us that Annamie Paul backed the coup against Bolivia's first ever indigenous president, Evo Morales. She loves NATO, and she has stoked anti-China sentiment. She is pro-imperialist without reservation. It is clear to most observers that Paul would rather see the party self-destruct than concede the leadership. Few leftists will want to engage in a long, bitter, grinding war against the conservative leader's faction. A split, which seems likely and seems imminent, would debilitate both sides or all sides in this configuration. My final point is this, and maybe it's the most important one of all. There is no time left for gradual reform, much less for reform of the Green Party. Climate change is not coming. It's here. Western and Central North America are on fire. Hundreds of people died in the heat wave in British Columbia. Millions of sea creatures washed up dead on the shoreline. Globally, human climate refugees number in the tens of millions. Hunger feeds desperation. The big powers use it to foment war and to demand ever more military expenditure. The only answer to the madness of late capitalism is the sublime sanity of eco-socialism. If you agree, join Socialist Action. But whether you agree or not, let's build a mass eco-socialist movement without compromise and without delay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you both. So now we will go to our producer, Kurt, who will put into chat 3 questions from our online audience. And each panelist will have up to 5 minutes to answer either 1, 2, or 3. It's their choice. And we will start with Dimitri and then Barry. So Kurt, it's over to you to put the questions up.
Okay. So our first question comes from Mark Kosatsky, who asked, Dimitri, when you get a few Green Party members to look into socialist action, also, do you think you will run again for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada? John Wunderlich asked, this public meltdown pretty much eliminates the Greens as a viable party in this likely federal election this fall. My question to Dimitri is, what should progressives in the Green Party do? I mean, what should progressive Greens do in the next federal election? And Manny Hoops asked, Dimitri, are there any people or organizations we can support or look to inside and outside of the Green Party to keep pushing forward the eco-socialist movement?
Okay, thank you, Kurt. So we will start with Dimitri. You have up to 5 minutes to answer 1, 2, or 3 questions. Up to you. You're muted, Dimitri. You're still muted.
Sorry, I didn't know
No,
that.
that's okay. I think we muted you because there was some echo going on. Sorry about that, comrade.
That's okay. So do I have the, if I understand correctly, I have the option of answering
All 3 or 1 or 2, it's all up to you. And you have 5 minutes to do so.
First, I just want to say about Barry's comments that I really think Barry should tell us what he actually thinks about the Green Party and stop pulling his punches. So I'm going to be equally candid on my side, but respectful, just as Brother Barry was. So in answer to the first question, can you get a few Green Party members to look into socialist action? Well, that was going to be pretty tough at this stage because I got kicked out of Socialist Action last year for running for the Green Party of Canada leadership. Something about which I bear no grudges, by the way, which is, I think, demonstrated by my participation in this event. But, you know, it's hard to persuade people in the Green Party, socialists in the Green Party, to feel welcome in socialist action after my my expulsion from the organization. Do I think I'll run again for the Green Party of Canada leadership? You know, if and when the opportunity arises, assuming that there's a party to lead, and I hate saying it, but that's not a given at this stage. I would think seriously about it, but you know, I'd want to see who else is entering the leadership contest. I don't really have a burning desire to be a politician. I'm much more comfortable with the role of being an activist and a journalist. I find being a politician is presents significant disadvantages, and particularly with respect to your freedom of action and speech. So if I found that there were a candidate in the race that I could represent, that I could support in good conscience, an eco-socialist candidate who had both the determination and the ability to implement an eco-socialist agenda, I would probably prefer to do that than run myself. So I just have to see what, you know, the landscape looks like at the time. Then John's question, the public meltdown pretty much eliminates the Greens as a viable party in this election this fall. My question is, what should progressives in the Green Party do? I mean, what should progressive Greens do in the next federal election? I'm going to take a pass on that question. There's no good answer I can give to that question. Except to say this: you should vote with your conscience. You should always vote with your conscience. Last question, Dimitri, are there any people or organizations we can support or look to inside and outside the Green Party? Great question, Manny. Yes, absolutely. And Barry alluded to this. We are founding an organization called Green Left Canada. What I mean by that is the core members of my campaign team and some of our most committed supporters have come together, and we've been working on this for 6 months. And we've almost got our website ready to go. We're about to launch the organization Green Left Canada. Its mandate will be to promote an eco-socialist agenda at all levels of government. It will not be confined to Green Party members. We will embrace any eco-socialist, whatever their party affiliation may be. And our first order of business is going to be to promote particular policies that we've submitted in the Green Party policy process, which is going to culminate in a meeting I mentioned earlier in late August. there are 20 policies that we feel strongly about that we think Green Party members should be supporting so that we can move the party in a strongly eco-socialist agenda. But beyond that, we're talking about having a national People's Summit next year, which will invite left-wing organizations from around the country to have a grand discussion about how to unite the left and finally bring the dream of eco-socialism to a reality in this country.
Thank you, Dimitri. Barry?
Yes, I promise not to pull any punches. Just as our dear comrade Dimitri didn't with regards to socialist action. I'll come to that in a moment, just with a clarification. First of all, I think the questioner is right to describe the meltdown. The situation of the Green Party is, I guess, not just the rumor of a tornado, but an actual meltdown in practice, which will debilitate the party going into the election. This is the problem with a long-term orientation towards a petty bourgeois party, which is as undemocratic as the NDP, but it has no class roots in the working class. That's the problem. I don't want to suggest that the NDP is a paragon, that its policies are qualitatively superior to the Green Party. They are superior, but not qualitatively, because the NDP leadership is pro-capitalist. But the Green Party has shown no growth. It has, its results are distorted by the first-past-the-post system. Proportional representation would be a big improvement. We all fight for that, although it's not a panacea. We have some pretty right-wing governments and coalition governments in the world that are the products of PR. But nonetheless, the Green Party has picked up a few seats here and there in legislatures, but it has not grown on that basis. So the present imbroglio is a meltdown that will debilitate the ability of the capacity of the party to even field a full slate of candidates, and that's inescapable. The second point, or the second question that was raised, is concerning to whom should we look outside the Green Party of Canada. Well, there are many forces to whom we should look. To push an eco-socialist movement and agenda. One is the eco-socialist movement, the environmentalist movement, those who are fighting for an end to pipelines and conversion from carbon economy to sustainable green economy. But that requires public ownership. And I think I could be mistaken, but the last time I heard him speak on the issue, it's Dimitri's position that you can't fight for and try to achieve public ownership of big oil and gas because that would violate trade agreements. Well, these trade agreements have to be torn up, or the planet will become unlivable, and that has to be a demand that we articulate now and not put off to some indeterminate future once the Green Party is reformed. So, to whom should we look? Well, the environmentalist movements in the streets. We should look to the Socialist Caucus of the NDP. That is an obvious one, which unites hundreds and hundreds of NDPers who are radically to the left of the NDP platform, and actually to the left of the most of the socialists in the Green Party. And it's a substantial body of people, and that's why I say that the Green Left Canada is a very promising development. And although we may not agree on the precise path to a revolutionary working class party now, we can and should agree to build Green Left Canada, and to build it as a campaigning organization that's in the streets, that fights for the interests of workers, that leaves no workers behind, including workers in the oil patch, workers in the old energy industries, and that seeks to replace those industries with a sustainable green energy industry. Dimitri referred to a supposed expulsion that he experienced. Socialist Action didn't expel Dimitri. No, we said at the time when he announced that he was going to contest for the leadership that a choice has to be made between a Labour Party or a petty bourgeois capitalist party. You can't be in two federal parties at the same time. Even if you have no personal concerns about that, the parties themselves won't allow it, and nor should they. So we said choose, and Dimitri made a choice, and he ran a fabulous campaign. In fact, if someone ran for the leadership of the Liberal Party on the same platform it would be very interesting, and we would take note of it, and we'd want to talk to those people and bring them into Green Left Canada. If they were in the Bloc Québécois, we would have the same attitude. Let's work together in Green Left Canada. Let's have an anti-capitalist movement that spans all the political parties, and then hopefully the politics of the revolutionary socialists will come to the fore, will hegemonize, and will be the expression of the future party that we need for working class revolutionary self-emancipation. But we have a class orientation. We have a working class strategy, and that is predicated on independence from all parties. The support we give to the NDP is 1% support, 99% criticism. Just ask any NDP official, they'll tell you that. And we build Socialist Action as an independent party. We're in the streets. We're campaigning to defend Cuba against the counter-revolutionaries stoked by Washington. We stand up for Indigenous rights. We're for raising the minimum wage to $20 an hour, a policy that we won at the NDP Federal Convention in April. We're for public ownership of the commanding heights of the economy under workers' control. So that's what we stand for. I think Dimitri shares that, and the Green Left Canada should be based on such a policy. So I would say to him, do you agree with that? Let's work together.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go back to Kurt. For this time, we're going to have 4 questions, and you'll have up to 6 minutes to answer 1, 2, 3, 4. It's up to you. And we will start with Barry and then Dimitri. Kurt, over to you.
Okay, so the first question comes from Patrick Fury. Ms. Paul has accused certain Green Party members of making racist and anti-Semitic tropes against her. Did she have any basis whatsoever for these accusations? Anton Budney asks, with the infighting in the Green Party, how do we convince the eco-socialists to leave the Green Party and join revolutionary groups? Boyd Reimer asks, how do we all survive the climate crisis? Does electoral politics even have the answers, or some other movement? And Kevin Neisch asks, Dimitri, will you be recommending a slate of candidates for the upcoming Green Party Federal Council election?
Okay, Dimitri, it's all over to you. 6 minutes. You're muted again.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
So I'll deal with Patrick's question. Ms. Paul, she's related that she was accused of things like being a paid agent of the state of Israel, and things along those lines. I think that those accusations do cross the line and are certainly arguably anti-Semitic. They're definitely offensive, and no such accusation should be made. And I reject them unequivocally. And in fact, I put out a statement 3 weeks ago in which I referenced the fact that comments of that nature were being made about Ms. Paul, and that I denounced those comments. So there is, I think Ms. Paul has a legitimate complaint about some of the commentary, but as we've seen so often, those of us who advocate for Palestinian human rights, the allegation of anti-Semitism extends far beyond comments of that nature. And in fact, Noah Zatzman said unequivocally when he was asked by the press to substantiate his allegation of anti-Semitism against me and Paul Manley and Jenica Atwin, that the reason why he had leveled the accusation against us was because we had accused Israel of apartheid and ethnic cleansing. Again, we as a party are struggling with the question of what is legitimate criticism of the leader, what is legitimate criticism of a country, a human rights violator, and what is racism. And there's no doubt that while some people have crossed the line and deserve to be condemned for it in their commentary about Ms. Paul, that anti-Semitism, the charge of anti-Semitism, is also being weaponized against people who are criticizing Israel within our party. Anton's question, with the infighting in the Green Party, how do we convince the eco-socialists to leave the Green Party and join revolutionary groups? Well, I'm not going to, I'm still a Green. I remain committed to the Green Party. can't guarantee I'll be committed to the Green Party forever, but that's the way I feel now. So I'm not going to, Anton, respectfully encourage or help others to persuade people to leave the Green Party. I think they should stay in the party, continue to fight for eco-socialism, and not give up, because if they do that, their voice will not count. And we need their voices now more than ever. Boyd, how do we all survive the climate crisis? Does electoral politics even have the answer, or some other movement? That's the most pressing issue of our time, Boyd. And thank you for asking the question. It's very hard to feel confident about the ability of our electoral system to resolve the climate crisis. I'm deeply skeptical about that. I think we're going to have to bring to bear every tool at our disposal. Electoral politics is not in and of itself sufficient. We're also going to have to engage in massive civil disobedience, general strikes, protests, shutting down parts of the economy, the whole economy, calling out the politicians, the many politicians who are betraying us at every opportunity. No tool, no mechanism ought to be spared, because there is no indication that the electoral system on its own is capable of resolving the climate emergency. Kevin asked, will you be recommending a slate of candidates for the upcoming Green Federal Council election? A slate, no, but there are candidates I do support. I've endorsed Samuel Moisen-Dom for the position of Vice President Francophone. I fully support Colin Griffiths, who is running to be the GP Fund representative. I think Lorraine Reckmans, a member of the Indigenous communities, will be a fantastic president of Federal Council. I urge people to vote for her. Out in BC for BC rep, we have a couple of great candidates there. There's Keith Wiley and Lisa Gunderson. Those are the main ones that I would recommend to you. They're not the only good candidates who are running, but I would urge you to support those candidates.
Thank you, Dimitri. Barry?
Yeah, some terrific questions, and I'm happy to say I agree with many of the responses that Dimitri just made. So let's take 3 or 4 of those questions in order. Annemie Paul is a Black woman who professes the Jewish faith and who has been, I'm sure, at the business end of discrimination, the tool of discrimination in the workplace and in society, and for that she should be supported. But at the same time, her conservative politics do not serve the interests of the people who are the folks who have suffered discrimination. She's not for mass action. She's not for anti-racist action in support of the main victims of Zionist apartheid, the Palestinian people. She supported the coup that overthrew the first indigenous government elected in Bolivia, and I don't recall that any of the Green MPs stood up in opposition to that or in opposition to NATO. I know they're constrained and follow the leader, but sometimes you feel compelled to differentiate in some way from the policies of the party establishment. And I know the NDP MP for Churchill has often done just that. Annemie Paul has also used her identity in order to advance her personal ambitions and to advance her candidacy, her persona within the party. We call this identity politics, where you subordinate the interests of the oppressed and the working class to the professed interests of a particular segment within the framework of capitalist politics. And that kind of identity politics is contrary to the interests of those who fight oppression and seek their liberation from all forms of discrimination meted out by capitalist society. The infighting in the Green Party of Canada is referenced in the second question, and I think it's undeniable that it is eroding the capacity of this party to survive, much less to offer a socialist, eco-socialist alternative. Socialists have been leaving this party I don't know whether it's a steady trickle or a wave, but even the party admits that membership is down and income compared to the same period, the first few months of the year before 2020, is down. And so the socialists, the people who are most likely committed to fundamental change of society, are voting with their feet. Brings us to the next question: how to survive the climate crisis via electoral politics? It can't be done. And there are two reasons why it can't be done. First of all, electoral politics, an election is a snapshot of the class relationship of forces at a given moment in time. It is the product of everything that has happened leading up to that moment. And so electoral politics is not a vehicle for change. It can deliver a judgment on whether forces for change are gaining ascendancy. And the best way to do that is to do it in class terms. That is for working class parties to advance, and not bourgeois parties. They channelize dissent away from the goal of fundamental change. So the second reason why electoral politics is not a viable strategy is because of the class nature of the state. The Canadian state is not neutral. It's not an impartial arbiter of the contest between different class interests in society. The Canadian capitalist state, based on the colonial settler ambitions of the European powers that founded it, is on the side of big business. It's on the side of the super rich. It's on the side of the polluters. That's why Justin Trudeau may talk about green alternatives to the carbon industry, but then he spends $7 billion buying a pipeline in order to double track it to the West Coast. He's even, taken issue with Biden because of the cancellation of the major pipeline down the spine of North America, the center of North America. So he knows where the interests of his party lie, and he knows what the state, the Canadian state, represents. So we need to replace this state with the organized power of the working class, Indigenous people, and all the social protest movements. So there is no electoral strategy. The commitment to reform via electoral activity it leads over a precipice, and we saw that with respect to the most vaunted leftist party that gained government power on a purportedly Marxist program. That was Salvador Allende in Chile in 1972, which was crushed by a rebellion executed by, American policymakers and the Chilean state, which was a bourgeois state. So there is no electoral political solution. Climate action requires mass action in the streets and building independent movements and pushing working class parties to the left and pushing working class organizations like the labor movement to the left to fight for, to stand up for the right to protest these toxic policies. And finally, I'm no expert on the federal council election of the Green Party, but I am troubled by something that Dimitri said. Fielding a slate of candidates who are eco-socialists in the Green Party, I guess it's certainly the right of Greens to do that, and I wish them well. But I think it's a misapplication of energy to try to reform this party where the socialists are leaving or have left, where it is debilitated by a deep-seated factional divide, where it is in open crisis due to infighting. So the statement that he's committed in, the medium term, if not the long term, to this party is troublesome because, if we establish together with many others Green Left Canada, and Green Left Canada becomes an outspoken advocate of direct mass action, disrupts the actions of bourgeois politicians and the arms of the state.
1 minute.
Then the Green Party is going to serve notice on Green Left Canada prominent persons that they can no longer be associated with the Green Party, certainly can't be candidates of the Green Party. I don't know if Dimitri is planning to be a candidate for the Green Party in the federal election, which is perhaps just 3 or 4 months away. Maybe he can't win a nomination because he'll be blocked by the party establishment. But a long-term commitment to the Green Party is highly problematic and will run counter to efforts to build Green Left Canada. But anyway, we agree on the need to build Green Left Canada. Let's hear more about its policies. Let's hear some timelines. Glad to know that the website is just about up and ready to go, but we need more than a website. A conference sounds great. We'll be there. Let's work together on that.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my producer. It might be a small technical problem because I haven't been able to reach him. My questions keep bouncing back. So, Kurt, how many questions do we have left?
We have 4 questions left.
Okay, so we'll take all 4 and we'll give up to 7 minutes each to answer, and that'll be a wrap after that. So go ahead, Kurt.
Okay, so our first question comes from Peter DeGama, who asks, media reporting that Green Party Federal Council voted for a membership review of Paul's membership, which could be suspended. Will the party take this route to oust her or a non-confidence vote? And Judy Kosh asks, can Native people and industrial workers be green outside the Revolutionary Party? Justin Reinke asks, what is your number 1 tip for enduring and overcoming the relentless capitalist attacks when running as a proud socialist? And finally, Kevin Nash asks, Dimitri, could you clarify the Green Party difference between being the leader and being the spokesperson?
Okay, so we're going to start with Dimitri and then Barry, and you have up to 7 minutes to answer 1, 2, 3, 4. It's up to you.
My turn?
Yes, it is, Dimitri.
Okay. So Peter's question about media reporting the Green Party Federal Council voted for a membership review. So there's been, this is not the only instance in which this has happened, but the mainstream media has really done a quite terrible job of reporting on what's going on in the Green Party. And so today or yesterday, it was leaked to the media that the Federal Council had an in-camera session without Anime, which, by the way, is perfectly sensible and appropriate that you would not invite Anime to that meeting because Anime has a clear conflict of interest. As a federal councillor, she can't impartially fulfill her role in regard to the question of whether or not her membership should be revoked. And so I think from an ethical perspective, it was right that Anime would not be included in that discussion. What the media is not reporting is that our members' code of conduct does not give discretion to the party to preserve the membership of somebody who is litigating against the party. And my understanding is that Anime has instigated a legal proceeding. I don't want to get into the details of that, but that's the information that I have. And the members' code of conduct says that the executive director will automatically, no discretion accorded to the executive director whatsoever, initiate a leadership review for somebody who has commenced a legal proceeding, a member who's commenced a legal proceeding of a party. Now, personally, I disagree with that provision because let's imagine somebody sues the party for good reason. Their rights as a member of the party or other rights have been violated. They shouldn't have, if they have a meritorious claim, their membership shouldn't be revoked. Now, if they bring the litigation and they lose, and the court determines or an arbitrator determines that the claim has no merit, then perhaps then it would be appropriate to revoke membership. So I'm not, philosophically speaking, in agreement with that provision of the members' code of conduct, but that's what it says. And that provision was put in place before Anime Paul became a leader. And so I think the hands of the federal council or the executive director are tied by the plain terms of the members' code of conduct. So that's what's going on there. They're just doing what the members' code of conduct unambiguously directs them to do. Whether they'll ultimately revoke Anime's membership, I don't know. Personally, I feel that the best way for this to be resolved is for the matter of Anime's leadership to be determined by the members in general meeting. And the federal council should ensure that the vote is held by the members in August so that they can decide. And if Anime is determined by the members to be suitable to remain as leader, then so be it. That's the members' decision, and it will have to be respected. But by the same token, if they feel that they've lost confidence, that too should be respected. The second question Judy asked, I'm not going to address that question, Judy. My apologies. It's a big question. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by it, and it could consume all of the remaining time that I have, and I probably wouldn't do it justice. Justin, what is your number one tip for enduring and overcoming the relentless capitalist attacks when running as a proud socialist? They are relentless. There's no doubt about that. But I would say, if I was the one piece of advice I would give anybody running for political office as a socialist, it's that you have to counter the narrative that we are extremists, and constantly point out that the status quo, which is a capitalist status quo, a neoliberal status quo, is leading us down the path of extinction. The capitalist system is the core cause of the climate crisis, and therefore it is essential that people appreciate that we are the moderates, those of us who are proposing a solution to the circumstances, the conditions that are leading us to extinction, are by definition moderates, and those who are defending an existentially disastrous status quo are the real extremists. And this is a point that I made repeatedly, and I was very in a leadership contest, and I was very happy to see that it was one that was well received. And so always resist the false claim that we socialists are the extremists. We actually represent the essence of moderation. Finally, Dimitri, could you clarify the Green Party difference between being the leader and being the spokesperson? Well, we use the term leader to describe the person who occupies that office, but in principle, what we believe is that the leader should advocate for the parties that have been adopted by the members, democratically adopted by the members, and that the leader has an obligation to do that. The leader does not have the right to impose their will on the members when their view about a particular policy issue departs from what the members have decided. And so if you, as a leader of the Green Party, feel that you cannot in good conscience support a member-approved policy, then you have two options, in my view. The one option is, through the democratic process, try to persuade your fellow Green Party members to alter the policy. And if you can't do that, or unwilling to do that, then you should resign if you can't advocate for the policy in good conscience. Those are your options. But the one option you do not have, in my opinion, and a lot of Greens will agree with this, as the leader, is to say, I don't like the policy you've democratically adopted, I'm going to advocate for a different policy. Or I'm not going to mention that policy because I don't like it, I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist.
Thank you, Dimitri. Barry?
Yeah, thanks to comrades and friends who posed those questions. Again, I agree with a number of the things that Dimitri has said. Let's start with the membership review of Annamie Paul. Again, I don't know the intricacies. I don't know the shadow boxing that's occurring inside the Green Party Federal Council, but in general, I would say that I'm opposed to Annamie Paul being deprived of her membership in the Green Party, even if she's litigating against the party. I think that policy should be changed rather than she be deprived of her rights as a member of the party. I think she should be removed from the leadership on the basis of her policies and not on the basis of her personality or on the basis of her actions as a litigant or anything of the sort. Let the members decide. That, I think, is a terrific slogan. And you know why? Not just because it will bring issues to the forefront and give people meaningful choices, but it breeds a more democratic political environment. It means that, you can be outspoken, you can take issue with your party, but, the question is, have you crossed the class line in terms of the policy you advocate? Is it in the interest of the working class, or is it in the interest of the corporate elite? That should be decisive. The second question is a great question as well. Can Indigenous people and industrial workers be green outside a revolutionary party? Well, I regret that that we're not spending more time on this. I'm going to spend a few seconds on this issue because I think it's extremely important and it's worth the time. What does it mean to be green? Kermit the Frog was green. Elizabeth May thinks that green means green capitalism. She wants to foster an economic environment that encourages capitalists to reduce their utilization of carbon fossil fuels and to invest more in alternative sustainable energy forms. I don't think we have time for that. I mean, even if you could convince me, which would be a daunting task, that the capitalists can be persuaded to go in that direction, there isn't time before we pass the tipping points of catastrophic climate change. So what it means to be green, it means to be eco-socialist. This is fundamentally a democratic question, as all working class rebellions ultimately are. It comes down to democracy. How can we survive unless we take democratic control of the means of production? I'm not talking about the corner grocery store or the neighborhood barbershop. I'm talking about big industry. I'm talking about the industries that determine how the goods we buy are packaged, about the energy that's used in order to manufacture large items, large and small, from houses and automobiles to the clothes on your back. So that's not a consumer choice. Consumers have very little choice, and any choices that they want to exert take years to impact on the market in a major fashion. So to be green means to be socialist, eco-socialist. That's the only viable path to avoid extinction. There is no planet B. All we've got is this Earth, this green Earth, and we need to preserve it. We need to act in harmony with nature. British Columbia is on fire. That's the topic of the next Socialist Action webcast. We'll be hearing people talking to us about it on the front lines. There's no time to waste on reforming the Green Party or reforming any other political party that relies on electoral politics fundamentally. We need to take a different course. How could we overcome capitalist attacks when running as a proud socialist? Well, first of all, it's wonderful to start out with the aim of running as a proud socialist. It's very important to fight back against those who would try to victimize or who would try to marginalize socialists and who would try to red bait socialists. So we need to fight back. We need to say, I guess I have a slightly different slant on it than Dimitri. We need to say, you know, society is in crisis. The environment is at stake. Human civilization is at risk. Radical change is necessary. We're not going to try to be moderate. We need radical change. And radical change is going to be driven by the forces in society that have a material interest in it. That will even include, before very long, workers in the old energy sector. They're going to realize that there are no jobs below 10 meters of water, that there will be no jobs where, you know, people cannot breathe the air or drink the water or survive in a dysfunctional carbon-based capitalist economy. Radical change is necessary, and that begins with building mass movements in the streets that fight for public ownership of the commanding heights of the economy. And we can't be deterred by trade deals or other, structures of the capitalist status quo. We have to challenge them, and that requires saying that radical change is necessary. And not radical means going to the root of the problem. That's the origins of the term in Latin. Radical means root of the problem, solutions that go to the root of the problem. We need to expose capitalist hypocrisy. So that's part of our defense. It's a strong offense. It's saying to Justin Trudeau, you're a hypocrite. When you talk about meeting the Paris Agreement targets for carbon emissions, and you buy a pipeline and try to double track it, well, you talk about childcare, but you don't implement it. Liberals have been talking about it for 30 or 40 years. We need to call out the hypocrisy. When you talk about a new deal for Indigenous people, and the best you can come up with is to nominate an Inuit woman to be Governor General, to be the agent of the British Crown, which was one of the main sources of the colonial settler state and the problem that Indigenous people continue to live. That's hypocrisy, and we need to rub his face in it and to demand a radical alternative that is socialist policies, not capitalist hypocrisy. And finally, and I'll emphasize it again, mass action, not electoralism. We're not opposed to running candidates in elections. We support many candidates who run in elections if they run as candidates of a working class party, or if they run openly as socialists or as revolutionary Marxists. That's fine. But the election is just a snapshot of the class struggle at a moment in time. We need to base ourselves strategically on mass action, on building up the organizations of the working class, on building up the capacity of the working class to say no to concessions bargaining. You know, right now we're experiencing an uptick in strikes across the country. Steelworkers are on strike in Sudbury at Valley SA against concessions demanded. Meatpacking workers in the Beauce region of Quebec, members of the CSN, over 1,000 of them at a pork plant, are on strike over working conditions. Montreal dock workers went on strike against unfair working conditions, being required to work 19 out of 21 days in a period of time where there is high demand for their labor. The government of Canada broke their strike with legislation. That's hypocrisy on the part of a government that claims to be for democracy, that claims to be for working people. We need to expose them, and that's a good way to do it. Workers of Unifor Local 252 at the Nestle chocolate plant in downtown West End, Toronto, are on strike over job security issues. Steel workers at Rexplast, one
30
of it
seconds.
in North Toronto. Steel workers are locked out at National Rubber Industries over concession demands. These are the kinds of issues that Green Party members and socialists and peers and labor union activists need to get behind. We should be on those picket lines. We should have cross-picketing, unions supporting each other by joining their picket lines, by shutting down the plant, by shutting down the whole area, by blocking roads, civil disobedience. Yes, Dimitri is right. And that's what Green Left Canada should be doing. It should have an industrial policy that calls for public ownership and for disobedience and obstruction of capitalists who exploit foreign workers, you're exploited without status, who are standing up for Indigenous workers, who are fighting for a socialist transformation of society. And that is a struggle that knows no boundaries. That's the struggle for which we stand. And that's the struggle that we say, if you believe in that, if you're willing to join that fight, join Socialist Action, and together we'll build Green Left Canada and movements for fundamental social change in this country. Thanks very much.
Thank you. In fact, a special thanks to Dimitri, Barry, and to Kurt, our producer. It's been a very interesting and informative webcast tonight. Also, a thank you to our listening and viewing audience. Great questions. Great questions. Please consider being a supporter of Socialist Action newspaper, which we will send to you online. To fill out the form, just visit our website at www.socialistaction.ca. And if you would like to talk to us about joining SA, write to socialistactioncanada@gmail.com or just give us a call at 647-986-1917. That's 647-986-1917. And if you really like the show, please subscribe to the Socialist Action YouTube channel. The next SA webcast will be on Thursday, July the 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the topic Heat, BC on Fire, with leading SA member Flo Shade on the Wet'suwet'en territory, Jean McGuckin of Eco-Socialists of Vancouver, and Gary Porter, Socialist Action British Columbia organizer. In the meantime, please stay safe, stay healthy, stay active. Bye for now.